Very good. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to explode this up a little bit. Okay, there we go. So as Delaney mentioned, today we're talking about Workflow 2.0 in Dynamics GP 2015. It was really introduced in 2013, but we'll get to that. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to talk real quick introductions, just a little bit about me. I really like to talk about me. We're going to talk about what is Workflow 2.0. We're going to talk about some prerequisites. So what do you have to do before you can actually use it? We're going to walk through configuring one. We're going to actually walk through what it looks like when the users are interacting with it. And then we're going to talk about delegation of approvals and how, when your managers go on vacation, how are they going to still get our workflows up and running? All right, so a little bit about me. For those of you who have seen any of my presentations before, this is just my standard little slide that I show. I did start out in accounting a long time ago. I have been consulting for longer than I stayed in accounting. It turns out I find accounting boring on a day-to-day basis. As Delaney mentioned, I work I own Broware Solutions. We're a small partner up here in Toronto, where it is really, really snowy and not so nice today. Our demo environment today is Dynamics GP 2015 R2. Now I had to switch servers, so it's actually SQL Server 2012 that we're going to be seeing. Not that you're going to actually see any SQL Server. The SQL Server version really doesn't affect what we're working on. All right, so what is Workflow 2.0? Workflow 2.0, basically what it does, like it says here, a lot of people think of a workflow system as a way to get approvals on documents, but for us, we like to think of it more as a way to automate repetitive tasks. So if you think about your vendor approval process, for example, there's a couple of steps along the way that are not approvals. They're just things that have to get done. And you can use a workflow to track whether or not they did get done and whether or not they got done in a decent amount of time. So yes, there are approvals. The nice thing about it is IT doesn't have to get involved. The average user can sit down and figure this stuff out and have a workflow up and running in just a few minutes. It's really, really quick and really slick. It did get added in GP 2013 R2. It replaces the old SharePoint. I don't know if anybody on this call tried to put in the SharePoint workflows that they introduced, well, a long time ago. It was really hard to manage. It was hard to figure out. Even licensing was kind of confusing. This is out of the box. It works. It works really well. It doesn't use SharePoint at all. So it's much, much better product. And it actually ties really nicely to the Active Directory so that when you're flowing through your workflows, you don't actually need your approvers to be GP users. And you're going to see that in a little while. So with our versions, this is what we have. If you are on GP 2013 R2, you have the workflows here on this left column. In 2015, they added a whole whack more, some very exciting ones. But everybody at 2015 said, well, where's our payables transaction? And here it is in 2015 R2. If any of my Canadian brothers are on the call, the payroll here is US payroll, obviously with W4 and such. There isn't any Canadian ones yet. So some prerequisites. What do you have to do before you can actually run the workflows? So the first thing you have to do is install the web services. I like this Azure Curve blog post about how to actually go about installing the web service runtime. They go through, they do a great job of how you can configure it and what are all the settings. So we're not going to get into web services today. We're not going to actually install it, but I do recommend that you, if you are looking at setting it up, that you go and take a look at this post. Okay, when you are doing it, just think about if you are planning to use the web client, you do need to think about your actual deployment options before you install the web services. We like to set up an actual Active Directory user for the workflows themselves. In all of the samples you see here today, you're going to see that I'm using my own Active Directory account. That's just so that I can keep everything nice and tight in one place. Within a production environment, we will set up an actual workflow Active Directory user to send the emails out. We also like to set up Active Directory groups for notification, even if the approver is only one person, we still like to use groups and assign people into the groups so that we never have to go back and edit the workflows as people move around the organization. We can just change what roles they're in within the Active Directory. Okay, setting up workflow is actually really easy. You can do it in about 3 minutes after this phone call. So the first thing you want to do is the actual workflow setup window, and you can see here I've got the path to it. If you're a menu person like I am, which means you're probably old, like me, or if you're a navigation panes person, you can do it both ways. I gave you both. Make sure that you don't go to administration setup workflow for SharePoint. It is called workflow for SharePoint, but that's not what we want to do today. So let's take a quick look inside GP, where that is. So you've got administration right here. You do not want workflow for SharePoint, which is here on top. What you want is the workflow that is right about here, workflow setup. Once you pop that open, you're just going to fill in all of your emails settings. For anybody who is on Office 365, port 587 and smtpoffice365.com works. I've seen it in a few different spots, and obviously we use it internally. This is where you're putting in the actual server name for the web services that we talked about. So after you go to Azure Curve and learn how to install the web service, you're going to put in the address and the port here. Up here we've got a couple of buttons where we can very quickly test, is the email actually working? Is the email actions actually working? Now the email actions, just so you guys know, you're going to see later on that we're going to actually get an email when somebody submits something and says, hey, this is here ready for your approval. The email actions will actually allow the approver to either approve or reject that particular task directly from the email. They never have to go into Dynamics GP. So that's what email actions does. Oops. All right, so the second thing you want to do is set up an actual workflow calendar. This is where we define what are our working hours. So when we're talking about escalations later on and how long a task has and how quickly a person has to get it done, this is where we're defining what to count. So you don't want somebody to submit something at 4:30 on Friday afternoon and then have it get escalated on Saturday morning when nobody's at work. So you set up your calendar, set up what your working hours are. You also have the ability to set up non-work days, so any statutory holidays within your area, stuff like that, so that those days also get excluded. Now where that is inside GP, it's also on the administration, also under setup, but now it's under company, and right here you've got this little workflow drop down. So if you come in here, here's your workflow calendar, and again, it's just a simple go ahead and select from all of the lists. Okay, the next thing that you can set up. Now the emails actually come pre-configured. You can see here that they're using different things for example, action completed. It's already got the document ID. It tells you whether it's approved or rejected and who did it. So these emails are default. They're not pretty. You're not getting this as the most attractive email you've ever received. But they do give you all of the information that you need, and they do show you. Now you can obviously modify these within the body and within the lines. You can type your own messages. If you have different languages you have to send, we can do that too. You've got down here at the bottom the ability to insert and remove different document or workflow related fields. And that's it. That's setting up. 3 windows. It took me longer to tell you simply because I have to explain more, and Delaney wants me to fill an hour, but that's all there is to it. All right, so now our users are ready to actually start configuring workflows. Now I do have slides that go through kind of the different windows, but I think it makes more sense just to pop over to GP and take a look at a workflow that I've already set up. We're not going to show you anything that's not on the slide here. So, but I'm kind of not a huge fan of the slide deck. There we go. All right, so setting up a workflow is actually done right here under workflow maintenance. Okay, and the first thing that you'll notice is we've got all of the different series up here. So all of those workflow types that were mentioned in that earlier slide, they're all here. Okay, I just drop it down by series, and here's what I got. So almost everybody likes to see purchasing, so I always start there. Now, in my slides, what you're going to see is it's actually the payables transaction approval that we're creating, but for my example here, I've created a purchase requisitions one. Use the same steps though. Okay, when I have a new workflow that I want to use, for example, maybe the payables transaction approval. When I'm in here, I just click new workflow, and it gives me the ability to type in all of my header information and make choices about that workflow. So we're going to come down here and take a look at the purchase requisitions one. Okay, and you can see here, this one's actually got 3 steps. Now, one thing that I always end up forgetting just before I'm ready to start using this workflow is to actually activate it. So when you're done creating it, go ahead and click on active, and don't forget. Okay, so one of our first options, I'm actually going to skip past the steps for now. We're going to come back to the steps, and we're going to talk about the options for the workflow overall. So the first thing is the notifications. So do we want to send notifications by email? There are other ways for users to see that they do or don't have approvals to make. For example, I have a reminder on my workflow under my to-do on my home screen telling me that I do have a requisition that I need to approve. So if you have maybe a lot of different documents that a user has to go in and approve, they don't want to receive 20 or 30 emails a day telling them there's something to approve. So there's going to be other workflows that we're going to choose, or other ways for them to work that we're going to choose. And again, we'll come back to some of those in a bit. But if we are going to send the notifications, we actually get to choose which tasks people get notified for. Okay, so when it gets completed or approved or resubmitted, all of these things, what email are we going to send out? Allow the approver to delegate their tasks. So we're going to see later on delegation. It's probably a good idea to leave this turned on. I usually do leave it turned on, simply so that our approvers can actually take some time off. Maybe they aren't going to work one day and they want to assign their tasks to other people. Do we want to allow the originator to be an approver? Now, in my environment, I have to turn that on because I'm the submitter, I am the approver, I am pretty much everything for this workflow, just so that we can keep it within one screen. But you may actually want to say, you know what, if you're submitting this, you really shouldn't approve it. Okay, now here's what you got to watch out for. If you say the originator can't be an approver, but they're the only approver on your workflow, what you have to have is this alternate final approver. So the alternate final approver says if there's no other approvers, use this person. Which, by the way, it's me again for today. Do you always require at least one approver? So again, if we get into a case where the workflow has gone through its escalation processes and nobody has approved it so far, if you always require at least one approver, then it's going to come back here again and use your alternate final approver. Okay, so these last three all work together in tandem. Okay, down here we're deciding what are we going to do when a task is overdue. So do we escalate it to the next approver? It's probably the most common. We can escalate it to a specific person. So purchase requisitions, for example, if I have a requisition manager and they're responsible for making sure these things all keep flowing, I can actually come in here and choose that person. So let's choose Alan for now. He'll be shocked if he gets this email because he doesn't realize he's part of this presentation today. All right, so if we choose Alan, then what we're saying here is if anybody for any of these tasks screws up and doesn't do what they're supposed to, then we're going to escalate it to Alan and he's going to come and thump on their door. Okay, while we're in this lookup, we usually talk about this later, but we'll talk about selection types. So our selection types, this is all tied to our Active Directory. So when I chose people and groups, these are Active Directory users and Active Directory groups. So I can choose, I can start to type a name, I just hit my little lookup and it goes out and checks the Active Directory for the username. I can also do it based on my Active Directory hierarchy, and this is really cool. So what we can do here is say if, in this case we're talking escalation, take it from the workflow originator or the workflow manager and go to their direct manager, or we can go one above them, or we can go all the way up the chain, 5 levels up the chain if we have that many levels. This is all using the Active Directory manager fields. It's pretty easy to set up. We've done it internally. There's not a lot of us to set it up, but most companies, if you're using the Active Directory, those are already set up. Okay. So I'm just going to say escalate to next approver. You can also automatically reject it. So if nobody's approved it within a reasonable amount of time, we just send it back to the user and have them resubmit it. How are we doing for questions, Delaney? Anything out there yet?
There are no questions so far, but attendees feel free to submit them as you think of them.
Yeah, I'm pretty casual with that, so feel free to ask questions as you have them. We will leave space at the end, obviously. Okay, so let's talk about the steps within our process. So I talked before, this one happens to be an approval workflow. This is what I've built, but it doesn't have to be. It can be just a set of tasks that get completed, yes or no. Okay, so not everything has to be an approval. My workflow here, it's got really 2 branches, and one of them has multiple steps. So the first branch is it takes a look at the expense. Yes, it takes a look at the expense and says, is it being booked to the travel expense account? Okay, and if it is, then we have to assign it to Carrie Ann. So we'll walk through this in a second. The second branch, this one always happens, and it always goes to the submitter's direct manager according to the Active Directory. Okay, and then what we have there is after the direct manager has approved it, we take a look at how much it is, and if it's more than a certain amount, then the manager's manager has to approve it as well. Okay, so let's take a look at how we set those up. So with the use it travel, first of all, we're setting up the step type as approval. And what that drives is the words that are in the email, the words that are in all of the buttons that we're going to see when we actually walk through the workflow. So it's either approve or reject, or it's completed, okay, depending on whether it's an approval or a task. Okay, so where this guy over here, this is a first step, or this step follows a selected step. So you can see here that it's creating almost like a bill of materials for our workflow, where we've got multiple levels. So anything on the same level actually runs concurrently. So they're not serial, whereas how much is it only happens after the direct manager has happened. All right, so we talked a little bit about this a second ago, and this is the, does this action always have to happen? For example, I always have to go out and get my HST account when I create a vendor. That just has to happen, so I don't need a condition for that. Or does this only happen in certain cases? So in this case, what we have is the account index, the account number has to contain 5275. That's my travel account within my chart of accounts. Now let's talk about how that comes to be. When you guys first set up workflow, so the out-of-the-box workflow, I just made air quotes, just so everybody knows. The out-of-the-box workflows, the screen actually only looks like this condition screen. Okay, and you don't have these buttons across the top. But what you're limited to in that case is fields that are on the actual document or on the actual whatever it is that you're building your workflow around. So on your vendor master record or on your requisition in this case. Okay, there's a way to get your condition editor to include the ability to actually add other tables and other fields that are associated with the purchase requisition. Okay, I've put a slide in the deck that links out to a blog post from Jared Hall. And the blog post explains how to do it. It's a switch that you have to set in your deck's INI. So here it is here. This is joining additional tables for workflow conditions. It's a really good walkthrough. He tells you how to set or what tag you have to set within the DEX INI, which is right here, and then how to actually use it. Okay, so again, the link is in the slide deck that's going to be with this recording afterwards, the one that I'm sending to Delaney that she'll put on the site. And then go through and have a look at this particular post. It's a great post. What that gives us is the ability to link other tables. So by default, the purchase requisition work and the purchase requisition line were the only two tables that I could build my restrictions on. But within those, the account number actually isn't there. So in order to get the account number, I had to come in here, select the financial series, and find the account index table right here. I turn that on, and then what happens is those fields from that table show up down here at the bottom, and we can actually select one of those fields to use. That brings us here where we link the tables. So we created, in this case, a left join because that field, the account field's actually not required within the requisition. So we don't want to stop a requisition from happening. And then once we've done that link and selected the fields, then we can start using, in this case, the account number within our restrictions, our conditions. Now, excuse me. You have the ability to add multiple conditions, Okay, so it's just like it's like Smart List, it's like any other querying tool. You can add as many as you need to make this particular branch of your workflow work. Okay, once I've created it and it's down here under conditions, I've got my little edit button where I can come up and if I needed to change it, I could. Go ahead and click on update. Otherwise, I could remove it here as well. So I know I'm repeating myself, but I strongly recommend that you all take note of this particular setting because it does enhance the workflow by quite a bit. By allowing you to get out there, the example he uses in his is, what if I want to control the workflow based on vendor class? Vendor class doesn't appear on the purchase order, it doesn't appear on the purchase requisition, but it's certainly associated with the vendor. So you would use the advanced lookup window to make that work. Okay, so that's our conditions. So down here, who do we assign the task to? And again, in this case, I've got it assigned to a specific person because this is my travel, so Carrie Ann manages our travel. So within here, I've chosen a specific person, I've added them. I can actually add multiple people here as well. Okay, I give them a time limit. Now remember, the workflow calendar that we talked about earlier, in this case I'm saying Carrie Ann has 24 hours to approve this travel. Right? It's a long time. You know, people are going to be sitting there waiting for 3 days, but we're going to give her 24 hours. We think that's reasonable, and we're going to apply the workflow calendar. I didn't tell my team that I'm presenting today. So here's our workflow calendar. Do we apply it or not? I always tell people just turn that on. That's why we have a calendar. I don't want my 24 hours to include midnight tonight when Carrie Ann's probably sleeping. Okay, and what message do I want to send? Again, it's all about the email messages. And here I've got this document attachment documents. There's some debate about whether those go, but I can include the actual, if there's a document attached to it, then I can include that. Now remember when I told you we can actually have more than one assigned to on the list? If we do, we can actually decide over here, does only one person have to approve? So do I just blast it out to 4 people who could approve it, and I just need one of them to say yes? Or do I need a majority? So I blasted it out to 4 people. That means 3 of them have to approve it. Or does everybody actually have to approve it? If I'm sending it to 6 people, do all 6 have to approve it? And yes, I changed my numbers midstream. So that's how we built this step for the Is It Travel. Over here, yeah, we'll save those. Over here is our direct manager task. So this one always happens. As soon as somebody clicks on submit, it always goes. There's no conditions here. It is a first step, so it's happening concurrently with the Is It Travel branch. Okay. And look who it's assigned to, the workflow originator's direct manager. So we talked about that before as well. This is our Active Directory hierarchy. One thing we didn't talk about was different workflow roles. So I can actually assign a task to different people within the workflow. Usually I go with either hierarchy or people. Okay, so the manager has 8 hours to approve, and again, we're applying that workflow. Only one response is needed because there's only one manager, and we are sending out the email. Okay, now after that approval has happened, I have how much is it? We have to tell it which step it comes after, and you can have it serialized all the way up. So you could have, 8 steps in yours that happen one after the next. And just because one task is an approval doesn't mean they all have to be. In this, again, my example, they all are, but I could have a task in here that says phone Betty, and just the person who phones Betty has to mark it complete. That's it. All right. So our condition here, it has to be greater than $1,000. Okay, and if it's greater than $1,000, it goes to the originator's manager's manager, skip level manager. Okay, and again, that's all driven by Active Directory. So that's it. This workflow, just this simple little workflow that gets purchase requisitions approved, and if they're travel requisitions, they go to a particular person to get reviewed, is not just up to the manager. This took maybe 15 minutes to set up the first time. You guys can set them up super quick, just as easily. Okay, once they're in place, once you're ready, you go back to your main screen. Yeah, we'll save that, and you make sure the active is turned on. So congratulations, you are all workflow experts. So let's go and take a look at how that looks for the users and kind of how things get processed. Okay, so anyone who's watched me before knows that I'm a big fan of cooking shows. I did go ahead and put a pie in the oven earlier today. So I told you here I've got this purchase requisition that's ready for approval. So the first thing that happened when I submitted that, or when my user submitted that, is I got an email. Okay, so here's my task assignment email that I received. You can see here I can approve it, reject it, or delegate it to someone else directly from the email. It's telling me what company it is, what's the requisition, what information is on the requisition that I might need to know. And here's the comments. So the system administrator is the one who actually made the requisition, and the note was just please. Okay, now as an approver, I don't have to go to GP at this point. If I had my document attachment here, I could literally just click on approve or reject at this point. It's going to pop up in a little window to let me put comments in. I never had to go into GP. Okay, but if I'm in GP, you can see here I've got workflows that need to be approved. I can click on that, and it takes me directly through to my purchase requisition entry window. And from here, I can actually approve it, reject it, or delegate it again. Okay, I can also view the history. So after my user clicked on submit, which I'll show you in a second, it went through and said, okay, what elements of this workflow need to be assigned? So here's the actual submission. System administrator put it in at 11:35. My direct manager, who's me, actually has until tomorrow morning at 10:35 to approve it. And Carrie Ann has to approve it because it is travel, and it's due, she has to do this by the 29th. Okay, so that's our 24 hours. And as each person starts to actually approve or reject these things, the history is being updated. So if I go ahead and I reject it, okay, now when I go back to that document, number one, I can view the history and see that my direct manager said no. Okay, so everything else doesn't matter because the direct manager said no. Okay, now I can resubmit at this point. So this button is what's new. When you actually activate that workflow and you actually create it, the submit button shows up. So let me save that. This submit button shows up so that when they're done and they're ready to submit it to you for approval, they just hit submit. Okay, we're going to go ahead and resubmit. Okay, it'll go through, it'll figure out what emails it has to send. Again, we take a look at our history and we can see that it was resubmitted. So it was submitted, rejected, resubmitted. Here's what has to happen. Okay, now so far as an approver, we've only done everything within this window, and that gets kind of tedious if you've got 20 or 30 or 100 documents to approve. I also mentioned to you that you probably don't want 20 or 30 or 100 emails every day saying you have those documents to approve. If you come out to your purchasing landing page here, over on the left-hand side, most people only ever click on purchasing, and they know everyone's familiar with these boxes, and we're all happy. But all of these guys down here are what we call navigation lists. And with workflows in particular, we actually get a lot of navigation lists. Don't worry about that. That's an Active Directory thing. So I can actually get a list of purchase requisitions that have not been submitted yet. We don't have any. We've resubmitted that one already. I can take a look at my ones that have been submitted and are ready for approval, and I can actually select one or more than one. I can choose all 20 or 100 or however many there are, and I can approve them and complete them all at the same time. Okay, or I can reject them, or I can shift them off to somebody else and make it their responsibility. Okay, these navigation lists are awesome because I only have one here. Look at what else I have. I can edit the document right from here. I can go ahead and copy that requisition and create a whole new requisition. I can, excuse me, if it wasn't in the approval process, I could delete it. From here, I can create new requisitions. So these navigation lists, if you don't use navigation lists in your day-to-day life, you really should. This isn't a navigation list session, but you should really learn about them if you're not using them. They make people's lives easier. Okay, so we'll go ahead, we'll approve it. Okay, it has been approved. And now if I go back to my document, view the history, I can see what has happened. Okay, now it has to go to the how much is it, because it is over $1,000. So that's it. That's how a workflow works. We have, within this session, we have created our own workflow. We've set it up so that it sends out emails. We have a system where users can very quickly, oh, here's all my emails that I've been getting while we've been doing this work, just so you know I wasn't lying. Okay. And you can see here is my final approval that I got saying, okay, we're good. So yeah, within this, we've totally set up a whole new process. We've set it up to send out emails. Users can work from outside the system to approve or delegate or complete their tasks. And it's pretty slick, and it's all automated. So the last thing I want to show you before we open up for questions is workflow delegation. Okay, so where it is, you actually have to get to it from the user preferences window. So I, as a user, come into GP. Sorry, I come into Microsoft Dynamics GP. I'm going to click on User Preferences, and down here I've got this new button that you guys probably aren't used to, which is the Workflow Delegation button. When I click on that, I have the ability to say, take all the tasks that are assigned to Rod O'Connor, automatically delegate them, and I can do it by workflow type. So if I'm actually the manager of 3 or 4 different workflow types, or I'm an approver within 3 or 4 different, maybe I approve requisitions and purchase orders, and maybe I even approve AP batches, just because I'm that important to my company. I can actually assign each workflow type to a different delegatee, or I can just say, do it for all of them. Okay. Let's pick on Alan again. Say OK. So Alan is approved, and I can actually go in and do it by workflow type as well. Okay. So, excuse me. I can also give it a date range, obviously, so I can say only do it for today, only do it for this week, do it starting next Monday and go until the following Thursday, whatever my time off that I need to delegate that is, this is where I do it. Okay, and once that time is done, I can actually remove it, or I can turn off. Yeah, okay. or I can just go ahead and turn it off again. Okay, so that is our delegation. That's how we assign it out to other people. And that officially brings us to the end of our slide deck. I think we're a few minutes ahead, so we have some time for questions if there are any. Delaney, where are we at? Do we have any?
Hey, yes, we've got some questions lined up in the queue. Attendees, I encourage you to get those in. We've got time to answer a few more. I'm going to start right off with a question from Jim, and he was wondering, can binary stream multi-entity management info be included in rules?
Yes, assuming there's a link. So the way that screen works within our conditions is it's all about the joins.
Mm-hmm.
So let me get back to administration. So when we were in here, whoops, and we were joining our tables, as long as there's a link, all of your dictionaries are available, which is one of the great things that I love about GP is well, you know, love and hate, the dexterity language itself and the way it kind of ties it all out. So all of your dictionaries are here, and if you can find a link between the two tables, you can use them.
Okay.
Okay. But again, that's assuming that you've gone out to Jared Hall's post right here and actually done what he's saying in this post. Okay.
All right, thank you. And our next question is from Donna, and she was wondering, if the direct manager and the next approver are the same people, will it send to them twice to approve, or will it consider the first approval as approval for both?
It sends it twice based on what I've been testing.
Okay.
So if you take a look at our workflow that we did, where I'm basically the approver for all of these, except for, I mean, Carrie Ann got this one, but I'm the approver for direct manager. I'm also the approver for over 1,000, and it did send me the second. Let's go back and take a look at our history. So within our history, you can see I've got the how much is assigned to me at this point, even though I've already approved it as direct manager.
Is there a workaround for that or not really?
That's a great question. I'm not aware of one. I can certainly reach out, and what I'll do is when this gets posted to the GPUG website, I will post a note to it afterwards with the answer to that particular question.
Oh, great idea. Thank you. All right, so our next question is from Dee, and she was wondering if you could show the vendor workflow.
The vendor workflow, certainly. So I'm just jotting down that question real quick.
Oh, yeah. And I can email these to you as well if you'd like.
Perfect. Same. Okay. So the vendor approvals, it's pretty much the same. Let me just get up here. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to vendor approval. We're going to assign a new workflow, call it the vendor approval process or something along those lines. Okay, I'm going to save it. And now basically it's the exact same thing. So I can start to assign steps to it. See, this is why you don't type while people are watching you. Get the HST info. This isn't an approval. This is just going to be a task. It always has to happen. And you know what? I think Dawn should be responsible for that. Okay. I'm going to give him 1 hour to get it done. Okay, within the workflow calendar. I won't make him work on Saturday. I do want to send him a message. You know what? I'm not going to send him a message. We do a lot of these. So then I can go ahead and save that step. And now I have a workflow at this point. I have something that has to be completed before we can actually use that vendor. So now when I'm in the vendor maintenance window, You know, anyone see what I didn't do? I didn't activate it. I go ahead and make that active. Oops. This is one thing I didn't mention earlier that I should add a slide for as well. Each workflow type has to have a manager, and you can actually use the workflow manager as your alternate final approver as well. So now let's go back, make it active. And now when I go to vendor, okay, you can see I've got that submit button right up here, and then I can go ahead and submit that guy. Okay, and then that goes into the workflow status. So I shouldn't have been so crazy. So here's this guy. You can see that Don has to go and get the HST information. He's probably wondering why he just got that email. And I've got my whole history here as well. For whoever asked that question, there is, I did do one of the Take 10 at 10 with a vendor approval workflow that had multiple steps to it. It is available on my blog, and I know it's available through GPUG as well. So either one of those spots, you should be able to watch it.
Perfect. Great idea, Rod. Thank you. Our next question is from Alexandra, and she is wondering, does everyone who creates a requisition need a GP license? Am I correct that approvers do not necessarily need GP licenses?
Approvers do not need a GP license. Approvers could work entirely from the emails. I'm not a licensing expert, but I believe there is a workflow user license that's specifically for like the employee self-service, as well as I'm pretty sure it includes the requisitions.
Okay.
But check with your partner on that.
All right, this next one is a little bit long, so I'm going to try not to lose you. If a purchase rec is being routed to different approvers based on the GL account number, what happens to a PO that references account numbers belonging to different approvers? Can different PO lines go to different approvers?
So the PO can be sent to multiple approvers. So you can have multiple branches that are based on GL account being hit. Now, I don't believe they're approving individual lines. So in that case, what I would do is set it so that all approvers have to approve.
Okay.
Right,
That
but
makes
they
sense.
are essentially approving the purchase order. Just ostensibly, they're only looking at their own lines.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next question is, can an administrator activate a delegate for an absent approver?
Yes. Sorry, I had to chew on that question for a minute. Yes, so within the window, and I didn't actually show you that, within that user preferences window when I go to workflow delegation, so right now it's delegate tasks for Rod O'Connor because that's who I'm logged into Windows as. What I can do is say, you know what, Carrie Ann called in sick today, so I can select her and I can automatically delegate her tasks to Alan.
Do you have to be at a certain level to be able to delegate, or can anybody?
I believe this is open for now. Now what you could do is limit access, obviously through security, to this window in general if you're worried about people delegating just kind of randomly, and just have one person in the company responsible for recording the delegation.
Okay.
Maybe whoever approved the vacation time.
All right, our next question is from Jim. For payables check batch approvals, is the approval needed prior to printing? And once approved, can the check batch be edited?
Once approved. So I believe once approved, if you do edit it, this was a question that somebody asked the Microsoft person. I haven't personally tested that,
Okay.
but I believe if you edit the batch, it has to go back in for or be resubmitted. I believe is what I was told.
Okay. And is approval needed prior to printing for batch approvals?
I'm not sure. That's a good question.
We have some great questions today. I love it.
Yeah, you know what? When I did this one at Summit, I got hammered with questions there too, and I thought I had heard them all. So, um, so at what point? And again, for whoever, Jim, I think it was,
Hmm.
uh, I will answer that question when this gets posted online. I'll make sure to attach a note on both of these questions.
That sounds great. All right, our next one. Can the check edit list be included as an attachment with the approval on check batches in case the approver is not a GP user?
So you wouldn't necessarily include the edit list, but you can include payment details in the email. So when you're actually setting up the email, um, Alan's going to wonder why he's getting all of Carrie Ann's emails. When you're actually setting up those emails that we were talking about earlier, part of that is actually setting up the lines or what details are in there. So for example, a purchase order approval, you're including the actual the purchase order lines to say what's on the purchase order. You can. So you would include the actual check batch details within that that email. So email message setup. This is because I'm on Office 365.
Mm.
Okay. PM. So here's your payables batch approval email, and it's got the batch ID, and it's actually got the list of transactions here, as well as the batch total. Okay, so they're getting the same information, just not in edit list format.
Mm. Okay. So that was our last question in the queue. We have a few minutes, so attendees, I encourage you to submit any as you think of them. Rod, you covered a lot of great content today. What would you say is your one big takeaway from today's session that you want attendees to remember?
You know what? I think the biggest thing for me was this. So I actually used workflows for a while, and I didn't know about this particular setting, and it felt very restrictive. You know, like, why can't I have travel based on a GL account? It doesn't make sense. And in fact, the very first time I did this demo, I had used the account index. I had looked up what the account index needed to be and just used that. So it's kind of smoke and mirrors a little bit. But once I learned this, it really opens it up, and it really makes the conditions that much more powerful.
No, that's a great link. I'll make sure to add that as a related link in the content library entry so people can easily access that. That would be good. All right, well, since we don't have any more questions, I think I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar. Rod's contact information is right on the screen there. I highly encourage you to reach out to him if you attempt this on your own or have any follow-up questions. He is a wonderful resource, a wonderful guy. Thank you so much, Rod, for sharing your expert advice and perspective with us today. Do you have anything
Thank
you'd like
you.
to say?
Yeah, I'm going to beg these people to wait until tomorrow for the answer on these two questions.
I think that's a
Other
fair
than that,
request.
I'm good.
All right, thank you so much, everybody. Attendees, please fill out the survey at the end of the webinar. We send that feedback to Rod. We look at it ourselves when determining future sessions, so your voice is heard. Thank you again, everybody, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.